IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach Podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach, and today we have a very interesting episode. We're going to be talking about something that I'm extremely passionate about. We're going to be talking about the whole concept of identity and understanding what identity is, because throughout our life we go through different identities and we start making changes. But it's important to understand how we make conscious changes through these identities and understand what our identities are. So with me, I have an expert on understanding these identities and how to make a shift in these identities. So join me in welcoming Anthony Trucks to the Habit Coach Podcast. Anthony, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, it's morning to me, but I believe it's evening to you.
It's 7:00 in the evening here. And this is, I think, one of the latest that I've recorded a podcast. So yeah, welcome to the Habit Coach Podcast and the way that we record now these days across the world. I absolutely love this format. Earlier on, we used to have people come into our studios and now everything is virtual. It's brilliant.
It does work. I like it myself as
Anthony,
well.
tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this whole idea of identity.
Yeah, it was, I think we all have our own moments of finding our thing. If you think about it, everybody's always had an identity. It's not something that was all of a sudden just happened across my life. It's always been in the background, floating from, childhood things and just experiences over lifetime. But it became, I guess, really apparent to me that identity was something that I had a unique relationship with. Probably around my early 30s, man, like 31, 32 is when I kind of realized like identity is this thing that of all the people in the world that I personally know, I have navigated probably more identities than many people have. And so I found within it, yes, there's frustration because when you have shifts of your identity, it usually happens reactively. Things get tough, a marriage falls apart, you lose your job, you get sick, you lose somebody, like something happens and you navigate it by just sheer survival, getting up, going through the motions, doing my thing. And I never think about who I'm becoming while I do it. And so I navigate a lot of those things in different ways and sometimes not so good ways. But over time, and I found a really good space where I have some interesting skill sets that I use in my life almost accidentally and then found out how to use them on purpose. And from that created a process that allows me to help other people do it on purpose also.
That's fascinating because very often the identity happens to us. We don't consciously choose it, right? How should we actually start defining this word called identity? What is it that fits into this identity when we think about it?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Your identity is, man, it's everything. It's essentially, it's who you are when you are not thinking about who you are. So if you think about
Lovely.
how you live your life, how we go through the motions. Let's say somebody cuts me off in traffic. Say, somebody says something rude. The way you respond, the way you react, how you wake up in the morning, your natural disposition. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? There's certain parts of us who it shows up without us trying to show up that way. But that is our identity, and that is responsible for, in a roundabout way, how much money we make, how much joy we have, how many friendships we have, how great our relationships are. And so while your identity, it is something that lives inside of you, right? It lives inside of honestly, in your brain for the most part. It actually shows up in every moment of your life, every waking moment. It shows up in the way you handle things, the way you live your life.
So that means that if you have to change your identity, you have to actually change all these different aspects of your life, right? Isn't that a huge task?
Yeah, no, you don't have to. I think the interesting part, I use the word shift, right? And it's not change because change is heavy. Like change, if you think about change, that means I have to like completely change something. Like changing direction is difficult. If I make a shift, right, it's a small adjustment that on the far end has a big change. So it shouldn't be a vast change. And you don't have to change everything. You have to shift all parts of yourself. There are actually 6 components for the most part that make up your ideal identity, that make up who you are. And any one of them can make an adjustment and change the entire whole over time. And so when I talk about adjusting or shifting your identity, think about it. Who you were when you were 15 years old. You're kind of the same guy. You're just a little bit older. There's some nuances. There's some differences, but you're not a completely different person, right?
Correct.
And that is the reality. The thing, when I talk about shifts, we've already done this. Like you mentioned earlier, we've all already made these shifts. We just didn't think about them. We just lived our life started doing things. In fact, I love that it's called habits, because the habit coach, if you think about your concept, habits are what lead to who you are. In fact, it's you are what you consistently do, your habits. The
Mm.
interesting thing is nobody ever thinks about who I become with the habits I've chosen. They think I may make some more money, I may be happier, I may be more efficient, but you never think about, well, who am I as a human? If I choose to make habits of, I get up at 5 in the morning and I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and I work from 5 to 7. Okay, if that's the habit you choose because you want to be great at business, well, are you a good husband? Are you a good father? Are you healthy? Right? No one thinks about like all the aspects. So we choose these habits and we become somebody. And a lot of the time we're not thinking about the far reaching aspects. Who am I 10 years from now, 15 years from now? And so the interesting that we're always doing it. So it's not actually that hard. It's already being done. The hard part typically is adjusting like the river, right? Because we're flowing in this way. And then when we want to do something, we want to have something else in life. It's not what do you know or who do you know? It's who are you with what you know? And that sometimes it's like carving a new path in the river. It is
Mm.
difficult to do that, but you don't adjust immediately. The river has to flow. So I don't make a sideways 90-degree angle into the river and say, flow this way. I make a little bit of a curve on the bank and a little bit more and a little bit more. And over time, you can kind of course that river somewhere else. But that's how it is. It's not this crazy, difficult, hard, long thing. In fact, we're already doing it. It's just a matter of doing it with intention.
And do you see certain stages that people typically go through in their life when they're changing their identities? Like, are there set situations when the identity changes? Like you mentioned, when you get married, when you become a father, etc., etc.
Yeah, there's not like a definitive. If you look at like Eric Erickson's work, he goes through what's called the psychosocial stages. There's about 8
Mm-hmm.
stages. And through that, you'll find there are different stages from, childbirth up through, elderly. There are a lot of different stages. However, when you look at the changes like that are in real life in real time, that are not scientifically based, we'll call it the world we live in, any level of moment can adjust you. It could be a car accident that you have on the way to work one day, but it can also be anytime you've been doing something for a long period of time, let's say 5 to 10 years plus, you've been doing this thing. And for whatever reason, by choice, because you want to try something else, or by chance, because the world just did something, right? You wake up one day and you're no longer doing that thing. Now, whether that day took place yesterday or 10 years ago, that moment in time is the one where a lot of people, they don't even recognize what it is. But from that moment, they've been living a life where they're not in flow. They don't feel like they're in a space of power, and they're just kind of surviving. They kind of go with the flow. And so those are the moments typically when we have these crises, an identity crisis, right? And that crisis is one that we're sometimes acutely aware of. When the relationship falls apart, I feel unlovable. I tuck away. Nobody should be with me. I suck, right? And I start living my life in a way where that becomes right. So I don't have a girlfriend again or a boyfriend again, or I don't get married, right? Those are these moments, and that's acute. Sometimes you don't even notice it. Sometimes it happens because all of a sudden, the job you have, like I don't like this job very much. So like you're still there getting your paycheck, but you're not doing a good job. And after a month, 2 months, a year of doing this, you eventually just hate work. You're not a happy person. It affects your health. So now you're overeating because of stress and you're getting out of shape. Like these little things happen, but it's slower over time. So there's not a definitive like this happens and this happens. None of that exists. It's just moments in time when our life adjusts without us expecting it or with us choosing it, and how we handle those situations.
Oh man, Anthony, you just like defined aspects of my life so perfectly, because I went through exactly that stage where I thought I was on this path of business and growth and all of that. Health went to the side,
Yeah.
relationships went to the side, everything went for a complete toss. And the beauty of it is that you have no clue it's happening to you. And that
No.
is what you're pointing out, saying you have no clue that this identity shift is taking place, this shift in who you are and the life that you're living is taking place. But imagine if you could become more conscious about that.
Mhm.
And I love the way that you're bringing it out, because as soon as you become conscious about where you are and where you want to be, you can start making those choices.
Yeah.
Is
It's
there a
really what it was.
starting point in this? And are there stages that people should be going through?
Yeah. I mean, so I created a method years ago that it's interesting. I say I created the method. I just made it easier to understand. Right. I didn't create identity. I didn't create how it happens, but I created a process that allows you to pay attention to it, to
Mhm.
consciously choose how you affect your identity. Because most people don't consciously choose. They had teachers and they had coaches and they had, parents. They had people that were, as they were growing up, telling them what to believe in, telling them the television, the movies, the friends outside. And so you just were being programmed without even realizing it. Like your identity was being created and you just were living that life. So for me, what I've looked at is like, well, what if we went back and saw, well, how did that take place?
Mhm.
And how can I adjust it? Right? How can I actively, for the first time in my life, choose my identity and then choose my success with that? And so the process I created was called the shift method. And it is called that. And so there's three central stages. There's really just a basic, and I'll give you the first one because what you're asking for. I find that a lot of people, there are things going on in their life that they're completely unaware of. They are oblivious. There's a statement that I love, and it's hard to see the label when you're inside the jar.
Love it.
Right? You can't see what's going on. And so a lot of people, the first stage for me is the C stage. It's seeing, and it's seeing it at depth beyond what you see in the mirror. It's looking at yourself internally and saying, who am I? And you may not like the answer, right? You may not actually appreciate or enjoy who you are. And I've had moments like this in myself when I remember I was early 30s and I was divorced and I had, I wasn't a good father to my three kids and I was out of shape and my business wasn't going very well. And I was like, man, I don't like this guy. I don't want to be alone with him. I don't want to spend time with him. So I would go and hang out with friends and I would, drink alcohol and I didn't want to be with Anthony. And so I came to find like, man, I had to really see who I was. And when I saw who I was, I didn't like me, but there's a benefit to this. Because what happens is if you don't see what's going on, you'll never give yourself the right permission to improve. You'll never tell yourself you need to go be a better dad. You need to go be a better husband. You need to go be a better, coach. Like you'll never actually go do that because you haven't seen it and you haven't given yourself permission. So our ego shows up and says, no, I'm good. I'm great. I don't need any help. No, you actually do. And until you can see that and let the ego go away for a little bit and work on it, you'll continue to keep living your life in that manner. And you'll continue to keep having that same stuff in life. And most of the time, it's not good stuff.
Man, Anthony, you're just like showing aspects of my life. I remember this moment in time when I had gone to a therapist because I was just getting out of my divorce as well, and she said that, so Ashdin, who are you? And I was like, what a daft question. I know who I am, right? Like, what a stupid question. And I was like baffled by it. And she said, no, think about it. You were exactly who you thought your parents wanted you to be. Then you were who you thought your wife wanted you to be. And then you thought who society wanted you to be. But who are you? And
Yeah.
that was like a light bulb going off in my mind saying, I have never consciously thought who I am or who I want to be.
Yeah.
Right.
No
And
one
it
does.
was that's the first time somebody actually put it out like that.
Smart. Yeah, it's true. And no one does. I didn't. No, it's not common to it. I think the majority of our life, we're trying to find good experiences and live life in a manner where we avoid difficulty and avoid confrontation or conflict. And so in doing so, we very easily slide into situations that we really, if we thought about it, we wouldn't want to be in. It's what, and the jobs, relationships, these happen. We just kind of like, all right, I don't want to be mean or rude. So I'll go on that date again, and like you slide into something you really don't belong in. And the reality is if you were to wake up to it, you'd look and go, man, if I had that conscious choice, I would have never made that choice. But we just did it through reaction, through the emotional feel, or to avoid confrontation or conflict. And every time we have done that, it has solidified a little bit more of who we are, to where eventually, here's the hard part, eventually it becomes so much of who you are that you'll protect it. You'll actually protect that position, even though deep down you're like, I don't like this. But because it's who you are and you don't want to lose who you are, you'll protect it. It's difficult because then you're pretty much fighting to stay where you're at.
Right. So so right now, people listening to this podcast, they must be thinking about, okay, so what is my identity? Is there a
Mhm.
question that they can ask themselves? Is there a technique that they can use that's introspective to figure out where they are at this point in time?
Yeah, definitely can. There's I created this thing. It's called the slower go grid. So it's kind of like a GPS, right? We're talking about getting to the point of your identity you want at the back end. And just like a GPS, you can't find the destination or the path to it without knowing where you're starting because it asks,
Mm.
what's your current location? And so I was like, well, that's a good question because what is somebody's current location, right? And so there's actually a couple different ways you can go through it. The one that I think is pretty good for us talking about it now is called the ID phase grid. It's identity phase. So it's figuring out what phase you're actually in your identity. And
Mm.
when you can understand kind of what phase you're in, it lets you know, oh, okay, now that I see that, I know I can adjust. And so here's how it works. If you think about a grid, a regular, 4-section grid, and on one side you have what's called pretty much you're seeking or are you searching for your identity? And then the other side is, are you locked in? Right. And so what it means is some people are not searching to find out more of who they are. And they also haven't locked into any identity. They don't know who they are. Like, so I'm not looking to become somebody. And I really I don't even know who I am. So this is a person I call lost,
Mm.
which means they're lost in thought, lost in the world. They're lost in themselves. These are people who don't feel very good about themselves because they don't know who they are and they don't feel like even having the energy to go look. So they do dumb stuff all day long. They blow their life up, right? These are people that are lost. Then you have people who never went searching for an identity, but they locked into one. This is the person who didn't go looking to see what the world offered. So they got the family job. They became a nurse or a doctor because mom said to or dad said to. These are the people who, all of a sudden, like they went to university and college because they're supposed to go to. They never went looking to see what the world offered, but they locked into an identity. And they get down the road 30, 40, 50 years and go, man, I'm unhappy. I should be happy. Why am I not happy? Well, because part of you hasn't had a chance to go see what the world offers. And you don't really know if this is it. And so these people are really uncomfortable. And they just say this, that they are the people that you're around and you think, why isn't this person happier with all the success they have? That's a person who essentially is locked, right? They're locked in place. Now, what you
Right.
have on the other side is someone who said, you know what? I am searching to find out who I am. These are the people that's called wanderlust. They travel the world, they try new things, they go see new people, right? They have it locked into their identity. They tell people, you know what? I'm trying to see who I am and what the world has. And they're not locked into anything. So they're okay trying new things, right? Because if you're a doctor, God forbid you go and try, a marijuana or something. I'm making something up, right? You don't do that. But if you aren't that, if I feel like, I'm just anybody, I'm just Anthony. You can try whatever you want. You can experience the world. And I don't mean doing things that are against your religion or that are debauchery. Like I'm saying, just go and take trips, meet people, explore, right? Go hiking. Those kind of things, when you do them, it allows you to experience the world and find that thing where you go, oh my gosh, I love this, right? So that's a point where I call open. You're open to the world. You're searching for identity. You're trying to see what's out there, but you haven't locked into one. But here's what's beautiful. Eventually you find that thing. You go, man, I love podcasting. Oh man, my name's Ashdin. I love podcasting, right? I found this thing. And then what you call it is found. You have found your thing. So you're in a space where you went searching, you saw what you liked and didn't like, found the thing you liked, you locked into it, and now you're found. You love your life. You're enjoying it. It's like beautiful. People come around you. Like, I bet people come around you and they're happier. They're more enjoyed. They're like, this guy's he's a cool guy. Why? Because he has found something that suits his identity in life. Now, here's the caveat. There are times when people find what they're supposed to. They are found and they do it for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. But eventually they wake up one day and go, I love this thing. I know I do, but it doesn't excite me the same way it used to. The tingles and, like the goosebumps and the butterflies, I don't have them the same exact way as I used to. Man, what do I do? And then you don't want to tell your friends this thing because like they think you're found and you're amazing. And so we then get to the point of feeling like, man, there's got to be something else. And we think we can't go seeking it. When the reality is you can go right back to open and go, you know what? I found this thing and I love this thing and I'm happy, but I want to see what else there is out there. Let me go back to open. Let me open myself back. Let me unlock from only this identity and go seeking something new. And the cool thing is, in doing that, you bring tools from your found stage. You have network of friends, ways you communicate, you bring your joy, and you can find something new and go, wow, I love that too. And you can be found again. So a life is lived in that open and found stage consistently. So when you're saying, how does somebody know where they're at? Ask the question, are you closed? Are you locked? Are you open? Or are you found?
So beautiful. And I think people who are listening to this right now can immediately put themselves in one of these boxes, saying that, all right, I'm I'm right now in this confused state. All right, if you're in this confused state, what is the next place to go to? Ideally, every place would be going to first open and then from open going to locked. Am I right?
For found, yeah. That'd be the goal, to go to found. So
Right? Found, sorry.
yeah. So I would go in that circle. So say you're locked in, like you have this identity and you're doing this thing, but you don't feel like you love it. Go and open yourself up, unlock, and go find new things. Go searching. It's pretty much be open to the world. If you're open and you're like, you know what, I'm done exploring, I'm done testing, I'm done sampling life. Find something and say, I'm going to commit to this. Lock into place. That's simple. If you're lost, you're like, I don't even know who I am. I'm not searching. Start searching. Just go and see. It may be uncomfortable. It may be a little bit scary because you meet new people and put yourself in new uncomfortable situations. But life is lived in that manner. Life is lived in that bubble of experiencing great new things. And when you find the right people, they love you. They bring you in. They accept you. So you got to kind of go find the people that are already doing the thing that you wanted to try.
So beautiful. So many people are scared from starting again because they think they're starting again. Instead of realizing that they're never starting from zero, they're starting with all the experience that they got from the previous lives that they were living and what they were doing earlier. And if you understand that it's just a step of growing, so feel free and give yourself permission to try new things. Find different passion projects. I don't know if you've met lots of people who are very, very trapped in the fact that they don't want to experiment at all. They don't have a hobby. They don't have a passion project. They are living the grind. And very often they say, is this life? And every time you tell them, why don't you get a hobby? They're like, why would I do something like that?
Yeah. I know people like my best friends like that.
Right. And you want to take their head and bash it against the wall saying, do something fun for yourself. Like, where is the spark? Where is the joy going to be coming from? And I think finding these aspects and constantly finding them, trying something new is so important. Learning new skills. Absolutely brilliant. Anthony, when somebody goes through this process and they start thinking about it, how should they start cementing a new identity into their life?
Yeah. So essentially, you have to figure out what we'll call it the levers are, because there's actually different parts that comprise and make up the identity. And if you don't know what those are, then you can't make the right choices. And so if you think about it, your identity is comprised of three core pieces, but there's like essentially what I call them is our overlapping aspects too. And so what I mean is we have these areas. So think of it kind of like a Venn diagram, the three circles, right? So if we have three circles, on one of the circles, it's called the very top circle, you have beliefs. So your identity is comprised of certain beliefs that you have about yourself, about the world, about what's right, about what's wrong. You have certain beliefs. Whether or not they are shared by other people, they are your beliefs. You also have thoughts. And the thoughts are the conscious and subconscious thoughts you consistently have every day, whether it's the ones that are running that I'm not in control of because they're just there, the subconscious thoughts, or the conscious thoughts I have about the person I'm around or what I see, right? So the active thoughts, or whether or not I can take action or I can do it or I can achieve. You also have the actions that you can take, the big, bold actions, like the things that are the ones that move the needle, we call it, that are scary, but they can really have a cool outcome and make your life different. Now, in each of these areas, they overlap, right? So my beliefs and my thoughts, where they overlap is my mindset, whether or not my mindset is good. And that's pretty much your mindset, I believe, is more of like your action, your mind in action. When I'm moving, when I'm grooving, when I'm doing something, do I feel confident? Do I think I'm capable? Do I think it's possible, right? Because what happens, my mindset's good. Like I can go and tackle anything. I can tackle the world, right? But if the mindset isn't, we're off. And the way the mindset kind of gets weakened is if I have, let's say, strong beliefs of what I'm supposed to do in the world, but my thoughts question myself. I believe I'm supposed to go talk and share and impact the world. But can you, Anthony? Are you supposed to? What if they make fun of you, right? So when I'm thinking the negative thoughts in opposition of my beliefs, well, now my mindset weakens. And so that's one area. If you get all those in line, you're great. Now you have what happens between thoughts and actions. So if I think I'm supposed to do something and it's an action based, the in between is my habits, my constant thoughts about the habits, right? So for example, where the big action might be, you know what? I'm going to go and jump off this cliff and skydive for the first time. That's one big action. But the actions that really craft and create our identity are the everyday. Do I read a book? Do I exercise? Do I run the podcast? I write the video, write the blog post? Do I make the video? Whatever am I doing consistently, right? Those habits over time, they create us. And in fact, the more you create, the more it creates you. The more I do in one area, the more I own that's who I am now. If all of us, say your first podcast, you're like, well, I'm trying a podcast. 100 podcasts in, I'm a podcaster, right? I did the habits to get to that point. So that's the big piece. And then the one that I think is almost the most important is between beliefs and actions. Now, it's interesting because if I have a belief I'm supposed to do something, but I don't take the action, I lose confidence in myself. I lose pride. That area is the pride area. Beliefs and actions create pride. So if I believe I'm supposed to do it and then I go and do it, I feel good. I got pride about myself. And when you're proud, think about people that are proud. Proud people, they do things. It's who they are, right? Proud for my country, proud for my team, proud for my family, right? I believe in supposed. The reason they got that is because they had a belief and they followed through with the action of it. Now, if somebody's saying, how do I become the identity that I want? Well, in the middle of all of that Venn diagram where everything intersects, that's your identity. So if you have strong beliefs, strong thoughts, take bad actions, your identity is missing the actions part. So you can't have pride and you have bad habits. So you're all over the place, right? But if all these things are in place, beliefs, thoughts, actions, I got a strong mindset, I have good habits, I have personal pride, I have an amazing identity showing up. Now, what I look at and you people go, well, how do I concretely determine that? Well, first off, where are you at on the grid? Figure out what's going on, right? It's a big piece. Secondly, now you can go in and go, you know what? My beliefs aren't as strong as they should. I really, wow, them now I think about it, like I don't believe in myself at a level I should, right? Or you know what, my thoughts, I'm not thinking positive. I keep beating myself up. I don't have great thoughts. Or you know what, my habits are kind of difficult. Like I want to have a good habit of, I don't know, showing up to work and doing a great job, but I get lazy at work. I have bad habits there. Or you know what, every time it's time to take the big action to ask for the raise or to start my business, I clam up. I don't do it. I get scared, right? So when you start looking at those areas, if you're very honest with yourself, you'll be able to see very clearly the area that somebody yourself needs to work on to start improving the shift towards your ideal identity.
Beautiful. Let's take a quick break and get back to the conversation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, See It, Cred, and Global Victoria. We thank you so much for making all of this possible. So this week on Cyrus Says, Tapsi Pannu was recently featured in the Netflix original Haseen Dilruba was on. They discussed her experiences in Bollywood and a whole lot more. On Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi enlightens us with his wisdom on how one can get freedom from their own thoughts or insecurities when they communicate with others. On The Millennial Athlete, Tanvi and Shlok fill us in on all the drama from the world of sports with Wimbledon, Euros, and World Test cricket making headlines every day. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav Mamoria kicks off a new series, Beneath the Veneer. We travel to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, where he takes us through his first experience of encountering the Red Sea. We have a brand new show, Misconduct. It's a true crime show hosted by Ragvi, a lawyer, and Nisha, a PR pro. They tell us about the story of Cyanide Malika, the lady who offered cyanide-laden sweets to women and after they die, loot their gold. On the Global Victoria Tech Talks podcast, we showcase some compelling new tech stories coming out of Melbourne. On one episode, Pawan Srinath speaks to Joe Agan from Nelnet International, where they discuss how the pandemic has affected the edtech sector and its evolution. Another episode has Varun Digirala talking to Ross Simons from Big Ant Studios about the gaming ecosystem and how they envision translating a sport to a game. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. We are having a fantastic conversation. So it is not a set point for starting for everyone. It is figuring out where you are on this journey, seeing which of these are mismatched. Are your thoughts mismatched? Are your beliefs mismatched? Are your actions mismatched? Or which ones are not showing up the way they should? And then start working on that and tweaking that more.
Yeah.
Then you can start thinking about how do you start creating this identity.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
We're all different. We just all have different things that we're struggling with. And so if you try and do other people's work, if you think about this, so imagine climbing you put a ladder against a building, you start climbing the ladder and you get to the top of the ladder and you realize the ladder's leaned against the wrong building. So you have to figure out what your building is to start climbing, because if not, you can climb the wrong building and you wasted time and energy. So you have to know what your areas are to improve upon.
Absolutely. And do you think this process should be something that is done internally? Do you think this is a process that you typically would also ask your friends or family to help you out in? How would you go about doing that?
Oh, great question, man. So you have to. If you can't see the label, you got to get someone that can see the label, right? If you're in that jar, you need to have other people. So my process is the way I work things through. There are very specific exercises that engage outside people to show you who you are. Because there's this great quote, I can't think of who said it, but it says, "You are not who you think you are. You are not who I think you are. You are who you think I think you are." Right. So it's this outside perspective. And so if we anchor to this and we think about it, we kind of need to involve other people to give us a view of ourselves that we don't see currently, or maybe we try not to see because it bothers us, makes us feel uncomfortable. So I'm really big on enlisting outside help to give you some perspective. It's not easy. It's actually fairly difficult the way we go through it. But when you do it, it gives you so much powerful clarity.
In fact, this reminds me of what the therapist said and the words she used. She said, you were who you thought your parents wanted you to be, right?
Yeah.
It was who I thought my parents wanted me to be. It wasn't what they wanted me to be. And when I was in my business, and when I was in my family business, rather, it was what I thought they expected of me. And I killed myself working because I thought they had those expectations from me. They might not have had those at all. So it is a very strange way of us projecting onto them and them projecting back onto us that's taking place here. Right? It's almost a dance that's happening. So it does involve other people. And like you said, you need to get them involved in this process.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
you have to. If you don't, you're wondering, hoping it figures itself out. And hope is not a good strategy.
Hope is definitely not a good strategy. And, Anthony, towards the end, is there a way that we cement this identity into our life? Is there something that we know that, now this identity has become mine, or I have succeeded in this particular task that I set out for?
No, actually, I don't think you do. That's the thing is, unless all of a sudden life stopped moving, the light, you're continuously growing. We're always moving it. We're always having to adjust. And there's a statement I love, and it's you could never step in the same river twice, because the river's not the same. It's always flowing. And the man is never the same. They're always growing. And so when you ask, do you reach a concrete point? I don't think you ever do. I think you can have a grasp of it in real time, but it's never going to stop. It's always like, it's just kind of like putting a plant inside of a jar. It'll eventually outgrow the jar. It's not going to stop growing unless it dies. So with your identity and who you are, every day you get up, you're putting yourself in a position to meet somebody new, to learn something new, to experience something new, to read a new book, to watch a new TV show. And every time you do that new information, without you knowing it, it's growing you in some direction. And so while you may know who you are, there'll be times you wake up a year later and go, wow, I didn't even realize I'm not the same person I was a year ago. Didn't even notice it. It happened so slowly, I didn't even notice it. But that's really what happens to us. So I don't think we ever meet the end until we've met the end.
It's so interesting. Towards the start of this pandemic, I went on this trip of listening to a lot of spiritual videos, listening to a lot of the gurus talking about it. And a number of them were talking about dissolving your identity, right? They were talking about removing your labels, right? And they were saying that the less you have these identities and the less you have these labels, the less baggage you're carrying, because the less expectations you're putting on yourself, less expectations you have from the world putting onto you, right? In your journey, have you noticed this taking place? Have you learned about any of this, about dissolving identities?
I don't know if it's dissolving identities. I think I totally understand the concept, right? It's to get rid of the ones that don't serve. I've done that. I don't know if I would have called it, I didn't call it dissolving identity, but here's what I do know. We have multiple identities, right? Now, I don't mean multiple personalities. You're not a woman inside of a guy's body. No, I'm not saying that. It's kind of like I have a different identity when I'm with my wife than when I'm talking to you, and when I'm with my kids, with my clients, or on a stage. I'm at the core the same person, but the expressions of my identity are different in different environments. Now, I do understand the concept of like some of them I don't need to have. You know what? I don't need to be the head coach of my son's football team. I don't need that identity, right? When I have that label, it gives me stress, and I got to do more parenting and more coaching and more. You know what? I don't want to deal with that. So I can dissolve the identity and say, you know what? I no longer am a coach. I no longer am a smoker. I no longer drink. These things. And so when you get rid of the ones that I believe are deterring and pulling away from the positive identities you want, it does clarify because there's less baggage, there's less overwhelm, there's less stress, and you get to be more of who you are. Because here's the thing, I don't like the idea of not having any identity, because I believe humans are happiest in motion. We're happiest when we're doing something. Like, think about it. I'm having fun talking to you right now. I'm having more fun talking to you than thinking about talking to you, right? Than my day getting in the morning. But when we're building something, or we're creating something, or we're like, there's just this joy, it flows, and we can't wait to get back to it. And I believe the identity gives you an opportunity to be in that flow that we as humans enjoy. And so while, yes, you don't want to have identities that are slowing you down, get rid of them. I believe there are the ones that we need to have in life that allow us to know who we are and be able to experience life in a way that gives us joy. But yeah, I do agree. Like, there are some we don't need. And if we continue to keep adopting and holding on to these, they just slow us down and make us unhappy.
Absolutely. Beautiful. In passing, you mentioned something saying about dropping the identity for being a smoker, for example, or being an alcoholic, for example. And, when we talk about habits, we say that the last part or stage of when you're doing a habit creation is that you have to become this new person that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That identity change has to take place. It is that the habit of exercise will cement itself in you if you start thinking of yourself as a fit person and do the things that a fit person does, right? Yeah. The same way you need to change the identity of you not being a smoker. Forget about I quit being a smoker. That big identity shift that has to take place in that last part. Yeah. Are creating habits an important part of this journey in changing and creating these identities? And how do you typically work with people for those habits?
Yeah, no, they are. It's necessary. Without habits in place, you cannot shift your identity. There's almost no way, unless it's the identity in a negative direction. Like, I lost something big, then you all of a sudden like lose a sense of self, and you can gain it. But even in any capacity, the habits that you have, the things you do daily, those start to create who you are. There's a statement I love that is, what you create creates you. Mm-hmm. And the process of creation is the hard process, right? If I'm going to create a new human, create a new business, create a new, career, creation, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes failure, it takes success. But that journey is one to where, when I've done it over a long period of time, I all of a sudden wake up one day and go, that's who I am. Like, you feel like, man, I'm a cricket player, like, why? Well, because it's the last 30 years of my life I've been playing, so the habits I have are around that. So that's who I am, And so the idea is this thing where, like, yes, habits are necessary. Now, the ones that I work with people and choose, a lot of them end up being ones that they know they should do, but don't do. That's usually what it is. Like, they're ones that people know they should be ingraining, and they don't do them. And that's the hard part, because what happens is every day we have that belief and that action taking place. I believe I'm supposed to do this habit. I don't do it. I don't have pride in myself. And it's a perpetual cycle. And so I don't like myself. I don't even think that I'm worthy of a new identity. So people think I'm not even worthy of that. What makes me believe I can go after that? It's not about belief. It's about commitment. Can I commit to taking the actions that will get me to believe in time? And if you can commit to the actions, the belief comes right with it. So it's a process, man, and everybody can do it. And it definitely is hard. That's the whole point of it. Because you think about it, life is not easy. It just isn't. But you've already been living it. And if you do the same things, but with more conscious intention, you change your life.
Yeah. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And that is the critical part, right? The whole idea of the Venn diagram that you mentioned is that the more action you take, the better you get at taking that action. The better your belief comes in it. You believe in what you're doing. And this is something that we do in our habits. And we have these golden rules of habits, right? We have these 3 golden rules. And one of them is make it stupidly small. Make the habit you're doing so, and as a result, all you're doing with that is creating that action. It's not a full action. It's not the complete action, but at least you're taking the little step closer to it and creating that momentum. And both the identity shift and habits are about creating momentum, just getting that ball rolling and moving forward.
It's real small stuff. It's I think what ends up happening is the way that I look at it. And when I focus on the motion, because all we're talking about is the concept, right? We're talking about the concept around it, but we haven't yet talked maybe thoroughly about what the actual actions look like to do that. And in a simple way, what I look at is I'm not trying to get to the point where one day, like, I feel accomplished because I woke up and feel like the identity, right? Because then what happens is you're only going to be happy when you've reached the top of the mountain. And I think if somebody was to only be happy when they reach the top of the mountain, they miss out on the joy of the journey. And so for me, I don't fall in love with the destination. I fall in love with the day. I want to love the day. I want to love the steps. I want to love the journey up the mountain. I want to love the trees, the bushes, the birds flying around. Because if you love that, you'll keep taking steps. And eventually, inevitably, you reach the top of the mountain. So for me, it's like when I look at the actions of it all, if somebody is always looking at, oh, I got to do this today. Oh, I got to do this today. Eventually, you won't do it that day. And you'll stop making progress towards the top of the mountain. But if you get to the point of falling in love with the actions every single day, you'll look up one day and go, oh man, look, I'm at the top of the mountain. And you've had fun the entire time and you've enjoyed it. And that's where, for me, when I start thinking about the identity on a daily basis in an action banner, there are a lot of people who look at me and go, Anthony, man, how in the world did you do that? It looks so hard and so difficult. And I go, you know what? It was hard to get started. But after a while, it's hard to not do it because it's so much of who I am, where for you, it's hard to do it. It's hard for me not to do it because it's dialed in. It's an alignment inside with who I am as a human. And so what ends up going on is like where people, they fall short is they never get to the point of enjoying the day and doing it so consistently that it feels weird to not do it. So they don't do it. They don't have the outcome. They have failure and they think they're a failure. Whereas for me, it's like, I'm not measuring it. I'm not measuring any success based on how far I've gotten. I'm measuring it on, did I love today?
That is so powerful. You mentioned something right now, which is that when people think of themselves as a failure, and thinking of yourself as a failure is an identity after all, right?
Yeah.
How do you help people get out of this stage of failure? Because I think that is a very deep stage. And especially in our context, a lot of times people are beaten down, especially in the recent year, to think that they're failures. Right? The family says something and which hurts them and hits them hard. They might have lost their job. Something would have happened. They think they're a failure. How do you take that step forward? Because when you just are a failure, you just like giving up.
Yeah, well, there's actually levels of failure. And that's the first thing is most people assume that the one thing they did is it's a failure they can't come back from. There's actually different levels. There's about 6 levels of failure. And I call actually this process called reframing failure. And so what you have is 6 levels. The top 3, we'll call it, they're usually not that helpful because most people don't learn lessons. So the top one's called abject failure, which is the failure took place and I assume it's unfixable. There's nothing in the world that can fix it. Somebody died, the plant smashed and you can't put it back together. That's an abject failure. So most people go, that's painful. I don't want to think about it. Let me walk away. The relationship fails. I'm heartbroken. I don't want to think about it. Let me go drink a beer. Let me go hang out with my friends. We don't even think about it. We don't learn lessons. The second one below that's called structural failure. It's a very big failure. Something that was very important broke, but it's fixable. but it would take so much time to fix it. I just don't even want to, I don't want to fix it. I can, but it's just not worth the energy, right? Structural failure. Then you have what's called glorious failure. It's going down in flames. I'm going to watch it burn. I'm going to walk away. Why am I even going to try to work on this, right? Now, for each of those, we typically don't go back and say, what can I learn from this? Usually we go, I don't want to think about this. I'm moving on. So we don't learn the lessons and we assume we're a failure. We also, when we have failures, we put the wrong ones up this high. There's that. We're going to talk about the next levels, but essentially I want to have those three get in place. The next three below that are the three I essentially call are common failure, which is something went wrong and I apologized. You know what? I didn't mean to hit your car. I'm sorry. Now, sorry means I'm not going to do it again. In order for me not to do it again, I have to have learned what it was I'm not going to do again. So to say sorry means I've paid attention. I've learned, okay, great, not doing that, right? The next one's called version failure. Now, version failure is kind of like how anything else in that we'll call it the tech world works. We have version 1.0. We put it out. Wasn't that great, but I learned something. Let me go do it again. And we kind of, when you put it out there, you're understanding something is not going to be perfect, but you try it because you learned. I put it out. I learned this. Okay, let me improve it, right? We go back and forth with the version. Below that, the one that's kind of, I think the one we should most live in is called predictable failure. Like I know something's going to go wrong. Like when I played sports, I knew I was going to get yelled at and coached by my coach every day. Every day. It was predictable. I knew I was going to get something to improve upon. And if I go into anything in my life now, it's always predicted failure. I know something's going to go wrong. It may not be anything big, could be something really small. But now what happens is I'm not attached to the failure. When I look at my life and I have things go on, like my relationship fails, well, if somebody falls out of a relationship, our first thought is, I'm unlovable. No one's going to love me. So I make it abject failure. So what do? I never learn anything about myself or how it broke. I never learn about how I interact. I never learn anything because I didn't want to look at it. And what keeps happening? The same thing, because I never learned my lesson. But the reality is if I go, you know what? I'm lovable. But that version of Anthony, he wasn't the best husband, wasn't the best dad. That version of him, he needs to improve. What can he improve to go try it again and then learn again? So that process. So when you start asking, how do we handle the failures? Well, first thing is really think about what failure is slowing you down and where have you placed it? You place that failure in the wrong spot. If you put that one up too high, you're not learning the lesson that's right in front of you. But if you take it down a couple notches and put it in the bottom 3 levels somewhere and go, you know what? That version of me could have been better, or you know what? I should have known something's going to go wrong. Let me figure out what went wrong. And then now you don't have to feel bad because you're like, that's just life. I tried something, didn't work. What did I learn? I get better. That's the journey of life. And so now you actually, as opposed to having like anger and frustration, you have hope. You have joy for a better future.
And instead of being a failure as an identity, you're a learner, right? You're taking those challenges and you're taking it to the next level. And you're saying, okay, now what? Now what? Now what? This shift is so, so powerful. Anthony, do you mind sharing some of the stories that you might have experienced with people and the big changes that took place and how they went about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people I've worked with. We got everything from relationships. You've got people who've experienced like a person, like a partner being unfaithful. I have experienced that, but I've had clients that do it too. And the interesting thing is when you navigate it, it's like at first they had a current identity of who I was and how strong and how confident. And then when your closest person to you steps out on you, you have this complete shattering of that identity. And where most people go like, I'm a failure, I can't do anything, and they get stuck in that perpetual cycle of just feeling bad, they never really think about like, there's a way out. There's always a way out. And the way out is realizing that you aren't the situation, right? So what took place, it's not who I am. It's just a situation that happened to who I am. And then there's one simple statement that I live by in moments when things are really, really hard. And the statement is, action ends suffering. There's going to be moments in our lives where we feel so bad we don't want to do anything. I just want to sit here, watch my television show, listen to some music, and I want to cry. Like that. I don't want to do anything. And the crazy thing is the longer you do that, the longer you have to experience that pain. It doesn't go anywhere because you've done nothing to change it. And for me, in those moments when people have these things take place, their identity is shattered, I say, great, I know it took place. And I know the last thing that you want to do is anything and move. But this is the moment we have to, because the moment we start taking the action, we start creating. And then when we start creating, we start actually creating a different you in time. And it's a journey, it's a process, and it's harder for other people. But I've had a lot of clients from relationships to business to even their health, where like they don't believe they're capable. They've failed somewhere. It's been difficult. And we get to the point of saying, great, all right, what action do we take to end this suffering? I don't want to do anything, Anthony. I know you don't. I know. I've been there. 100%. You want to sit here and do nothing. But do you like how you feel right now? Well, no. Okay, great. So if you don't like that and you want that to stop, we have to take an action to stop that.
And no matter which aspect of life people are dealing with, it always starts with this: knowing where you are, knowing what you want to change, and then taking those actions towards it. Right?
Yeah.
I love the way that you've been explaining this with the examples and the various, the stages, like the 6 stages that you mentioned of failure. Absolutely brilliant. So Anthony, you were telling me that about your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the book, so everything we've talked about are, again, concepts, but I wrote a book called Identity Shift. I got it here. Actually, a little, look at that. Hey, there's the book right there. And the book was written in a way for anybody to understand identity simpler, but also to understand how to do what I'm talking about. How do I actually make the shift? So how do I look inside and say, okay, what parts of me are here? There's actually it's called Slower Go Identity Grid in the book. Is quiz you can take to find out what your actual current identity is, not where you're at, but what it actually is. But it guides you through a journey of like, how do I make the shifts? What habits must I develop? What comprises my identity? How does the shift method work? Like, it's all woven into a book that becomes a very great tool for someone to upgrade their life. Like, it's really a matter of like, how do I go in and upgrade my life in any capacity? And that book shows you exactly how to do it in a simple way. It's not a bunch of science. I tell people I'm a regular guy who wrote a book, but I have a lot of irregular experiences. I've done a whole lot in my life. And so I took it and made it very simplistic. So even my 16-year-old son can understand it.
There's a phrase that says that may you live in interesting times, right? And the stranger things you do, the more rounded or the more experience you have, and the more your mind can explore and expand. And I think that is the most important thing. Just keep getting new experiences and going through various things in life, and you have no idea where it's ultimately going to lead you.
That's Anthony, the fun part.
I loved having this conversation with you. How can people get in touch with you, follow what you're doing? Where all can you be found?
Yeah, so if you go to Instagram, it's simple. It's at Anthony Trucks on Instagram. If you want to get the book, go to identityshiftbook.com and use the code THC for the Habit Coach. And people can get, once they buy the book, for 10 people who give the first 10 people, I'm going to go ahead and sign a copy and send it over personally. But for everybody, you're going to get the audio book, you're going to get the digital book, but also a workbook that takes what's in the book and allows you to work through it like my clients do when I have coaching clients. I guide them through the process, and it's a separate workbook, but it's all free. So identityshiftbook.com, code THC. And outside of that, follow me on Instagram. That's where I spend a lot of my time hanging out and posting content.
Lovely. What's your Instagram handle?
At Anthony Trucks.
At Anthony Trucks. Lovely. Anthony, it was absolutely a pleasure talking to you. Superb. Thank you so much for coming on the Habit Coach podcast and showing us how to shift our identity. I think this is something that is so important and so ingrained with the way that we talk about things on the Habit Coach as well. So I'm so happy we got an opportunity to do this.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you. So start these habits and share with us your progress using the hashtag #TheHabitCoach. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com. or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome 180.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are two passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to the Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.